Hello and welcome to the FRAG channel. I'm Ben, and today I'm going to continue my series on the Higurashi games and basically just giving my opinions and sharing my thoughts about the series as I go through them. So this is going to be the third video, and we're going to cover Minagoroshi. That's the third answer arc chapter. So basically, this chapter seems like the big explanation chapter. It really kind of goes the furthest in explaining exactly what's happening. The good thing was it wasn't the typical bullshit explanation, which we got in some of the other answer arcs. That all the characters were just hallucinating and things like that. No, it was a bit. We have a villain. We have like some. We learn a lot of we learn a lot more, and it's not just the characters were going crazy. It's a bit more structured, so that was good. And we believe the big bad to be Takano at the end of this chapter, basically. So I did like for a change that it wasn't some weird, very convenient and convoluted explanation for what's happening. But yeah, it's good that we got this explanation at least. As I'm making this video, I'm actually partway through the final answer arc. It's a Matsuri Bayashi. So I know a little bit, but I haven't gone too far into that arc yet. So I pretty much still know everything I did, but I'm not going to spoil anything for the last one anyway that we don't know in this from reading this one. So yeah, this one explained pretty much everything that we needed to know. It was like probably the proper answer arc, which like summed up told us what was not really. Yeah, he told us what was happening. Now, let's go through specific things that I thought were a bit weird about going through this chapter. There's a lot of like critiques and little like nitpicks that I have. I thought this chapter was good overall, but I think that it still had some things that I found kind of hard to accept in my head. It was hard to explain that these things happened. I should probably rank it actually first. If I had to rank the series from this chapter from the rest of the answer arcs that I've read so far, I kind of like it the least. I know like answers like pretty much everything, but yeah, which is weird because on the flip side, the question arc, which this one is sort of based off of, which was the third question, which was the third question arc, where you pretty much follow Satoko and her uncle coming back and how they resolve it this time around. It was very a lot more emotional and it felt a lot more impactful in the question arc than it did when we're answering it now in the answer arc. So yeah, I guess if I had to rank them, I don't remember how I ranked the other answer arcs. It's been a little bit. The first one, I think I like the second answer arc the best. I like the first answer arc after that, and then probably this one after that. So the second answer arc I like the best, the first one I like the second best, and this one I like the third best. We'll see about the final one as I finish that. So anyway, some of the critiques I had about this was Hanyu. We practically get introduced to Hanyu in this chapter, so we realize that Rika the whole time has this being surrounding her. We believe it to be a Yashiro-sama, the guardian deity of Hinamizawa, I believe is what they refer to it. So, and she can only be perceived by Rika herself. No one else can perceive her. So she's basically just hanging around with Rika, and she can't interact with anyone else or be seen by anyone else or be heard by anyone else. And I thought, I was like, okay, so yeah, so that kind of explains why Rika feels a bit weird. And we start to learn about how Rika, with Hanyu's power, is able to go back in time or reset or go to different worlds. I don't know what their explanation exactly is for it, but basically reset things to try and not die around the festival. And so, yeah, that she can hopefully live with all the rest of her friends. And she's trying to get that perfect ending where no one has to die and she lives on with her friends. But it's taken her 100 years and she still hasn't figured it out. That's what they say in the visual novel. It's taken 100 years, and you know what? She hasn't gone any closer to figuring out who the mastermind is, who's behind everything. And I just think that's so weird, because Hanyu, as we know, is practically Rika's best friend. You know, she's the only one that can talk with her, and she hangs around with her all the time. And Hanyu is also invisible to everyone else, and no one can perceive her. And she doesn't have to just hang around Rika the whole time. She can just go and do whatever she wants, right? There isn't that limitation. So whenever I think about how it's taken 100 years to figure out the mystery behind what's happened and how they kind of figured it out this time around with Takano being the mastermind, how hasn't Hanyu already figured, how hasn't Hanyu been used as a tool to get this information, right? Like, she's so incredibly useful. Like, no one can see her, no one can perceive her. She's the ultimate spy, right? How hasn't she been used to get information for Rika on what the hell's happening? It's been 100 years that she's been like repeating over and over, you know, but she still hasn't figured it out. In that way, it just seems so weird to me. It's so weird. Like, how haven't you figured it out? And you have someone like Hanyu hanging around you. And well, so it's because of that I kind of got really suspicious of Hanyu. I was like, well, she's hanging around Rika all the time, and it's been like 100 years and they still haven't figured anything out, despite her being such a useful kind of person to be around, to have as your friend or your ally. And we don't really know a whole lot about her backstory either. I thought, yeah, so I am pretty interested in the backstory of Hanyu. So she's lived a long time, even longer than Rika. But we don't really learn much apart from her, you know, being that supernatural being hanging around Rika, and that she's supposedly a Yashiro-sama as well. But we don't get to learn about like her history with the village, because I imagine she would have hanged around there, because supposedly she can only be seen like by certain people. I'm assuming she can only be seen by the reincarnations of a Yashiro-sama, and that happened to be Rika this time around. And that happens like, yeah, it takes a long time for that to happen. You have to be like the first girl born in like a long chain before it happens. But that, you know, happened to be Rika this time around. But yeah, we don't get to learn too much. So because of all of that, I was really sus I was like, so this powerful person's around. They can't tell us anything about what happens to us. They can't tell us, and not only that, their attitude too is really sus as well. Because Hanyu is constantly telling Rika to just not really try and just to accept fate and accept that she's just gonna die and her friends are gonna die, and then that, and just to keep repeating the suffering, even though the longer that they repeat it, the weaker Hanyu's power seems to get. And she can't turn back time further because of it. So we only had 2 weeks to turn back time in the current period. So her power is slowly getting weaker as they don't really figure anything out. So even keeping that in mind, but she's still telling Rika just to not really care, just not really try, and not really try and go out of her way to fix the problems in the village and to help her friends and all that. She just she every time just tells her just not to. And that's so weird. I'm like, well, why would you do this? The reasoning behind her not wanting her to do that is because she wants, Rika's like the only person she can talk to. So but like, wouldn't you want her to live if that's the case? Like, if things keep going as they are and Hanyu never figures anything out because she constantly tells Rika not to try and not to figure out what's happening in the village, then eventually I assume her power is just going to get so weak that she can't even turn back time anymore. And so Rika's just going to die. And as we know, Rika's like the last of her line in her family. Like, no one, there's not going to be any more reincarnations of a Yashiro-sama. So she's not going to get to talk to anyone by that point. So she's just fucked. Like, why wouldn't you want her to figure everything out so that, you at least have that future going for you where even after Rika has like a good life and lives a life, but she passes away due to old age, there's still that she can, have a family and continue that line, and then you can eventually talk to the next reincarnation. But no, apparently no, just give up, Rika. Just give up. It's too much suffering, Rika. Just give into it, Don't worry about it. Yeah, so some of the motivations and some of the things in the characters were a bit questionable, and that's what got me really suspicious of Hanyu. But despite my suspicions in Hanyu, it's like the further we go through, the more I'm like, okay, well, it's not Hanyu. It's probably not Hanyu, but I still can't help but have this suspicion that she's the one behind it. But you kind of figure out that it's not really Hanyu that's the bad person here. But it was so weird just the way she acted and how she never really helped Rika figure out any of what was happening in the village, despite her being such an invaluable tool for information. She can like follow anyone in the village and just gather information as to what they do. Like, she could have followed Takano from the beginning and learned that, oh shit, she's working for some secret fucking organization and she wants to fuck over the village. She could have learnt that so easily, but she never did that. And the other thing, so apparently Rika could never figure out who was killing her because her memory just kept getting fuzzy at that point. And it was explained it's because she keeps getting like put to sleep. Someone knocks her out, and then, well, she has no recollection after that, and then she just dies, and then she just wakes up in a new world. So, and I'm thinking, okay, if Rika is knocked out, does that mean that Hanyu also gets knocked out too? I don't think that's how it works, because I think, because Hanyu can do whatever she wants. She doesn't have to be around Rika all the time, and I think they can also sleep, like if Rika goes to sleep, Hanyu doesn't have to go to sleep. If Hanyu goes to sleep, Rika doesn't have to go to sleep. So, at least that's the impression I got from going through this chapter. So, I don't know why, even if Rika lost her memory, why Hanyu couldn't, still be around and say, oh, it was this person. But okay, it was explained that anything that Rika tastes, Hanyu can taste too. So Hanyu gets her sense of taste from anything that Rika eats. So maybe because she was like given, like chloroform or whatever to put her to sleep every time before she was killed, it also affected Hanyu in that way too. That's possible. Yeah, that's the only other way I can explain it. But even if that's the explanation for it, how in 100 years, how have they still not figured out who it was? She's invisible. No one can see her. Anyway, I've been rambling about this too much. So basically, I had my issues with Hanyu and how in 100 years they couldn't figure out what was happening. That was my biggest gripe that I had about it. But it was still fine, this is one of those series, even if there's some gripes I have about it, it's like the journey was still very fun. Like I still had a lot of fun in a lot of these chapters, and there was a lot of good moments and things. So yeah, I'm fine with it overall. Like I don't really have a problem. I really enjoyed the Higurashi series regardless of some of my gripes that I have about it. But yeah, that's basically what I think about this series, and I think I've been rambling on the Hanyu point for way too long. Jeez. But that was the one big point that I had about this. And basically I just thought that was really weird. But I did enjoy it. And yeah, next chapter's the final one. We'll get to see the conclusion. So if you did enjoy listening to this, me rambling about Hanyu and how she could figure anything out for like 20 minutes, then you can look forward to the next chapter if I have any gripes about anything that happens there. That's been me for this video. If you did enjoy it, feel free to leave a like. If you didn't, feel free to leave a dislike. Tell us why you liked it, why you didn't like it. We're open to criticism in the comments. But that's been this episode, and I guess I can see all of you for the final Higurashi chapter. See you then.